Okay, good morning and welcome to Shiva YouTube, just Daf It. We're learning today Daf Yomi Kesubos, Daf Mem Tet number 49. We have an amazing share for you today. We're going to talk about whether a father has to actually feed his children. Do you have to feed your children? Until what age? You'd be shocked to hear what the Gemara has to say about this. You think, no, until 18 years old, he's got to feed them, he's got to give them an allowance, he's got to take them on trips all over the world, Pesach getaways, Sukkot in Israel. Well, the Gemara has a different view. We're going to see, let's get into it. Top of Mem Temenal, 49a. This is a continuation of yesterday's Gemara, where the Gemara said that a Nara Murasa normally gets skila if she commits adultery as a Nara Murasa. What about if she was Masira al-Chuppah? She was given over to the Chuppah, but she hasn't yet entered the Chuppah, the canopy. She was given over by her father to the Shluchim of the husbands. So the Gemara made a statement yesterday that is enough alone, that if she commits adultery after that point, she only chayiv chenek, not chayiv skila. So the Gemara asks, maybe you'll say, once they gave Masira al-Chuppah, and then right, the husband died, or she was an almana, she was a grusha, right? She goes back to her original statement. The Gemara says once already she's Masira al-Chuppah, even if she gets married subsequently to somebody else, right? She's already considered to be like she's Nichsa al-Chuppah of lo nivala. So she's no longer, even in a future marriage, she no longer has a din of Nara Murasa, even if she's a Nara still. We have a Tana the Ishmael already taught it. Tana Ishmael, the neder almana of grusha kol asher asher nasha yakum aleh. The neder of an almana grusha, a widow or divorcee, right? Whatever she took upon herself, it remains. Matal malomer, her neder, right? Matal malomer, velo mutzis b'kal bal. If she was married to someone and she got divorced or she was widowed, right? Of course, no one can be made for her nadarim. Her father lost her just when she married the guy, and now the husband's dead, or he divorced her. So who's going to be made for her nadarim? Why does the pasuk have to say yakum aleha that a nadarim can't be annulled? Obviously, they can't be annulled. Ella must be talking about Reisha Masra av l'shluchei bal, Shemasra shluchei av l'shluchei bal. Like we talked about yesterday, they gave her over to the shluchim of the husband to walk down the chuppah, accompany her down the chuppah, down the aisle to the chuppah. Right? Then he decided to divorce her. He died. I can't call her. She's not in her father's house. She's not in her husband's house. Once she left her father 1 second, he can no longer be made for her. Even if the husband were to die afterwards, no one can be made for her nadarim. And similarly, she has no longer did him Nara Murasa, she would be judged in future adultery of chenek. We also learned that in a Brisa, Brisa says 4 categorizations. She needs to be a Nara Psula Arusa, Beisavia Bishlam, and Nara comes to include a Lobogeris. If she's 12 years old and 6 months, she's no longer in the category of Nara Murasa, Psula, V'Lobo Ula. She already had Bia with somebody else. No, she was married to somebody else. Right? Even she went to the wedding canopy, but she wasn't at Bia. It doesn't come to include the 4th depiction of her that she has to be Beis Avia, to exclude if she's not Beis Avia. I mean, the father gave her over to the shluchim of the husband to escort her down to the chuppah. We have another brayso with support. Once she goes into the shus of the husband, the domain of the husband, even for marriage, even if she was a nivala, she deserves chenek now. Nichsa l'shus habal ba'alma. It doesn't say nichsa l'chuppah, right? It says nichsa l'shus habal. Once she goes into the domain of her husband, even if it's not under the chuppah, she just gave her over to the shluchim of the husband to accompany her to the chuppah. Shma mina, so you see a proof from there. She already left to the shus ha'av, and now her punishment is chenek from now on. The Mishnah says, "Av enochayim zonas bito." Father is not obligated to sustain his daughter, to feed his daughter. Now, he explained it based on a drasha. He gave a sermon. We think he gave a sermon over here, Shabbos Shuva, or Shabbos before Pesach, right? The drasha over there, they talk about, I don't know, some lamdas, some weird stuff. He had a different drasha. He was talking about halachas, so I was supposed to talk about. He compared the two, right? Sons only inherit their father after the father dies. Similarly, daughters are like them in the fact that they only get whatever they get. They get sustenance, they get fed from their father's estate only after the father dies, while the father's alive is not responsible to feed them. So the Gemara later on says that when you're 6 years old, then there is a mitzvah until 6 years old. Then there is a mitzvah to feed the daughter. However, when and the sons, you have to feed your children until 6 years old. We're talking about after 6 years old. Whereas Mazonas Bito, who the Eno Chayav, the Gemara makes an inference. Mazonas Bito, he's saying not Chayav. Mazonas Beno Chayav. Sounds. Why did the Mishnah only pick the obligation to feed his daughters? Sounds like his sons he's chayav to feed. And then where it also infers Bito Nami Chova Hu Daleka. It's not a monetary obligation. Ha mitzvah ika. However, it is good advice. In mitzvah, right? It sounds like it is a worthwhile thing that you should be doing it. Mani Maslisan, who is the author of our Mishnah? Lo Rav Meir, Lo Rav Yehuda, Lo Rav Yochanan, and Roka. It's not any of the following Tanaim. We're going to see in the following brayso. The sign of mitzvah lozan as habonos. It's a mitzvah. It's not a monetary obligation, but it's the right thing to do is to feed your daughters. Certainly should feed your sons. To ask you Torah, they need strength to learn Torah. Divrei Meir, it's from Meir. Yehuda Omer, mitzvah lozan as habonim. It's even a chiddush is you have to even give food to your sons. And certainly to your daughters, because it's hard for them to go find work. They're gonna have to, lower themselves and, demean themselves to go find work. He says you have an obligation, a monetary obligation, to feed your daughters from your estate after you die. But while he's alive, both sons and daughters are not fed from the father. Who is the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Meir, Hamar Banim Mitzvah. Rabbi Meir, he says the sons a mitzvah. Sounds like our Mishnah that Banim is a chova. Rabbi Yehuda, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, Hamar Banim Nami Mitzvah. Rabbi Yehuda says the Banim are also a mitzvah, not a chova. Yochanan Roka, feel a mitzvah Nami Leika. Yochanan Roka, there's even not a mitzvah. Not even a mitzvah. Our Mishnah is mashma. There's a mitzvah to sustain your daughters. We can fit our Mishnah into any of these three opinions. The father is not chayav to feed his daughter. Certainly his son. But there is a mitzvah, there is an obligation. I don't know exactly what this means. It's mitzvah, it's a chiyuv mitzvah. We'll see more about this. It's like you have to shake lulav, you have to feed your daughter, or it's just good advice by Chazal. Certainly Labanim, because they have to learn Torah. Why did it mention Bito in our Mishnah? Top of Mentem Beis, the Afilu Bito Chova Hu Delega. Even your daughter, right? Even though it's not a Chova, Ha Mitzvah Ika, right? Even though a daughter don't learn Torah, it still is a mitzvah to feed them. Right? Same Rabbi Yehuda. You can say our Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda. He's not obligated monetarily to feed his daughter. Certainly he's not obligated to feed his sons, which technically go work. But there is a mitzvah to feed his son, because of Zilusa. You don't want them to demean themselves to go out and work as young children, so therefore there's a mitzvah to feed both of them. Why did it say single out Mishnah Bito in our Mishnah? Even his daughter, there's no monetary obligation, there's just good advice. You could even say our Mishnah fits with Yochanan Brocha. He's not chayav to feed his daughter. And certainly his son also. And both of them is also not even a mitzvah. The reason I mentioned daughter in the Mishnah is because after he dies, there's no obligation to feed his sons, but there's an obligation to feed his daughters. Obviously, the sons inherit his property, but if there's very little inheritance, then the meager inheritance goes to the daughters to feed them, and the sons have to be shoal psachim. They have to go from door to door begging stuff. Tanya nami, Enochai Amar Rabbi La Amar Reish Lakish, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chanina, Beusha Yiskinu in Usha. Usha was a place that they moved the Sanhedrin after they were exiled from Yerushalayim, presumably after the destruction of the second base of Hamid. Usha Yiskinu She Adam Zanis Bonav Es Benosav Kshen Tanim. Even though technically Mido Raisa, there's no chiyuv financially to support your children after the age of 6 years old. They midarabbanan and they're misakin that presumably monetarily you have an obligation. We would even garnish your wages. We would freeze your bank account in order to pay your children while they're ketanim, until she's 12 and a boy until he's 13. Is the halacha follow Reish Lakish or not? Tashma ki hava asul k'mei Rabbi Yehuda, when they came around Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Lahu Yared Yalav Ne'masa Shadya. They asked him, the father asked, I have to feed my children. He said, what are you? Yarod Yalda B'Ne'masa Shadya? You're like a jackal? That's what ours translates. I don't know. It's some wild animal. B'Ne'masa Shadya. You just have children and then you let other people feed them? I mean, it's stuck, all right? The Tzibur asked them and farnest them. The right thing to do, he said, sounds from Yehuda, the right thing to do is to feed them. We'll discuss more whether this is a proof or a disproof. The article seems to say this is a disproof, right? He's just saying, they're trying to humiliate him, right? Obviously, there's no chiyuv to feed them while they're ketanim, but we try to embarrass him to encourage him to do it. They asked Rav Chisda whether the father has obligation to feed his children. Get up in public and shul and humiliate the guy and say, this guy, all right, even ravens, which are not the most generous with their children, they would support their children. He wants children, he wants to support his children. This man doesn't want to support his children. So the Gemara says, a raven wants to support his children. Right? Hashem provides even to the children of a raven. They call out to him, meaning the father's not feeding them. When it's a white, it's young, it's white, it has white hairs. And the opposite with people, with human beings, they get white hair when they grow older. Apparently the ravens, according to Rashi, they have white hair when they're younger. When they're younger, the fathers want to feed them. The older, he wants to feed them. We'll explain this more in Yud Ben Sion. Again, he tried to coerce him, persuade him, really, with words. Right? You think it's right that you should have children and they'll be farmers going to stuck. You should feed them. This is only talking about if he's not a rich person. If he's a very wealthy person where he's supposed to be giving a lot of tzedakah, we force him to use that tzedakah to feed his children. Nasa Marami was a very rich person. He didn't want to feed his children, apparently. Still, he was Rav Nasa Marami, the Amora. And he made him feed 400 coins to tzedakah for his children. For some reason, he's very generous in his life. He decides he wants to make sure not only they have an inheritance after he dies, but even in his life, he wants to give everything he owns to his children. Still, even though he gave everything away, he gave his house, he gave his fortune, everything to his children, and he's still alive. And then the father says, "Wait a second, I need some eggs in the morning. Who's going to make my omelet? I have no food." So him and his wife can still financially demand that his children pay for his basic needs. Why do you have to tell me that him and his wife get nourished from his estate that went to his children? If a man dies and he leaves over his estate, right, and he has inheritors, his sons or his daughters inherit him, his wife gets fed from them. So if his wife gets fed, certainly him gets fed from his own nechasim. The Shalach Rabbi Megri say, let's say you died and you left a daughter, no sons, the daughter inherits you and your wife, right? Right? So the daughter has to feed her mother, or if she's not her mother, you're almana, right? You're almana, you're deceased, you're widow. This is Abbas. Let's say the daughter got married. Still, she has to feed her father's wife. Mesa Abbas, right? She married another man and she died. Now, who inherits the daughter? A strange man who's not related to them. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yanachos, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina. Al Yadai Amaisa. By me, it happened. This incident. Amram and Asan. Still, the widow and the original husband still gets fed from his achasim. Certainly, him and his wife, who gave over this huge present to their children, should be able to take their basic sustenance from whatever they gave over. The same Hasam who would like the Torah. No, the Chiddush is because they're an almana, a widow. It's hard for her to work to get a job, right? Here he's a man. He's an able working man. I don't know how old he is. 70, 60, maybe he's 30. Gave his inheritance to his children. I don't know. A really generous guy. He's like a Hasidic Rebbe. They used to make sure that any money they had, they would give it to tzedakah. So they wake up every morning with nothing, so that Hashem should provide for them. They shouldn't get matana b'dei basar v'dam. To me, it sounds like exactly the opposite. But usually we'd be relying on miracles or asking people for tzedakah the next day. So I don't think that's such a smart idea. So he could go work for both of them. Kamash Malan. No, he gets to take from his present that he gave to his children. Does the halacha follow what he did or not? Tashma, the Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan, Yonasan were standing. A certain man came, kissed Rabbi Yonasan on his foot. Rabbi Chanina, why is he kissing on your foot? I guess it's prevalent. I don't know. He gave everything in his lifetime to his children. He wanted to make sure it wasn't fought over after the Yerusha. And I forced him. I compelled him. The article learns I coerced him, persuaded him. You'll say that monetarily he can't collect from his children. He gave it away already. Therefore, I persuaded him, and therefore he's kissing me for doing him a favor. Dina, if you say monetarily, he can take from the present he gave. I don't have to persuade him, right? Technically, I can just bring him to Basin, and he can get the money from them. Basin can go into his property they gave to his children and take from there. Obviously, it's just a favor, and I'm persuading him. And the halacha is that I can't. It seems to be the halacha is you can't get the money. Once you give it as a present, you can't give it back. You can't get back your sustenance. You got to go work, like the Gemara says. That's the conclusion of today's shir. I hope you enjoyed. See you in Iyad Ben Sion. We'll discuss this idea of a father. The Gemara has a shaila. After 6 years old, is there takanas usha? Did it stand or not? Right until the bar mitzvah, there's a chiyuv to give sustenance to feed your children, your boys, your girls. And what about after bar mitzvah? We'll discuss that in Iyad Ben Sion coming up next.